The house was never meant to be permanent. That was the lie Mark repeated to himself as the moving truck pulled away and the street returned to its unnatural quiet. Just a place to land. A year, maybe 2. Long enough to get back on their feet after the downsizing, the layoffs, the conversations whispered late at night when they thought their son couldn't hear. The neighborhood looked peaceful in daylight. Wide streets, mature trees, houses spaced far enough apart that you didn't feel watched, but close enough that you felt noticed. There were no kids riding bikes, no people sitting on porches, just parked cars that never seemed to move and windows that reflected the sky a little too clearly. The house itself was older but freshly renovated. Beige siding, new roof, fresh paint that smelled faintly chemical even weeks later. Inside, the floors creaked in places that didn't match the layout, like the house had learned different proportions at some point and never quite adjusted. 3 bedrooms upstairs, the smallest one sat at the end of the hall, tucked away like an afterthought. Low ceiling, old carpet, one narrow window facing the side yard where the grass grew thinner the closer it got to the foundation. Caleb chose that room immediately. "I like this one," he said, dropping his backpack on the floor. Jenna hesitated. "It's kind of small, honey." Caleb shrugged. "It feels quiet." Mark didn't like that word, but he said nothing. The first night passed without incident. Caleb slept through until morning, and Jenna allowed herself to relax for the first time since the move. She told herself the anxiety was just stress, new house nerves, residual exhaustion. The second night, Caleb stood in the hallway long after he should have been asleep. Mark noticed him only because the light from the bathroom caught the boy's face in a profile, pale and unmoving. "Caleb?" he asked. "What are you doing up?" Caleb rubbed his eyes. "Dad?" he said carefully. "There's something under my bed." Mark sighed, already tired. "Buddy, it's a new house. Everything sounds weird at first." "It's not a sound." That should have slowed him down. Instead, Mark walked him back to his room, lifted the blanket, and knelt down. He used his phone's flashlight, sweeping it beneath the bed with exaggerated confidence. "See? Nothing there," Mark said. Caleb stared into the darkness a moment longer than made sense. "It was there before," he whispered. Mark smiled, kissed his forehead, and turned off the light. He didn't notice how long Caleb stayed awake. By the third night, Caleb wouldn't lie flat. Jenna found him sitting upright, knees pulled up to his chest, eyes fixed on the narrow gap between the bed frame and the floor. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you're gonna hurt your back." "It moves when you stop looking," Caleb said. Jenna smiled too quickly. "Your imagination's running wild." Caleb shook his head. "It waits." "For what?" "For me to forget it's there." That night, Mark snapped when Caleb asked to keep the lights on. "Enough," he said, sharper than he meant. "There's no monster under your bed." Caleb looked at him then, really looked. "That's what it says, too." On the fourth night, Caleb asked for the door to stay open, then the hallway light, then both. Jenna sat beside him, brushing his hair back. "Why is it so scary?" Caleb swallowed. "Because it knows my name." Jenna laughed softly. "Well, that's impossible." Caleb didn't laugh back. "It asked me how old I am." Her hand paused mid-stroke. "What did you tell it?" 8. His voice dropped. It said that was good, that I'd still fit. Mark checked under his bed again that night. He didn't know why he felt compelled to. Maybe it was the way Caleb wouldn't look at the floor anymore. Maybe it was the way the room smelled faintly damp, like a basement that had never been opened. Nothing had changed, except the carpet. One corner near the wall was crushed flat, like something heavy had pressed there for a very long time. Mark pressed his hand into it. The fibers didn't spring back. Probably the old bed frame, he told himself. Probably. On the 5th night, Caleb screamed. Not a nightmare scream. A scream that cut off mid-breath. Mark and Jenna were out of bed instantly. They burst into Caleb's room and flipped on the light. Caleb stood on the mattress, pressed into the corner, pointing down. "It's closer," he cried. "It didn't go back this time." Mark dragged the bed away from the wall. The space beneath it felt wrong. Not empty, not full, just deeper than it should have been. The light didn't reach the back wall. Jenna knelt and reached under, fingertips brushing the carpet. She recoiled. "It's cold," she whispered. "Why is it cold?" They moved Caleb to their room that night. He didn't sleep. Neither did they. On the 6th night, Caleb insisted on going back. "It doesn't like it when I'm in here," he said quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It says I'm cheating." Jenna frowned. Cheating at what? Caleb shrugged. The waiting part? Mark forced a laugh. "There's nothing under that bed." Caleb's eyes were rimmed red. "It says parents always say that." At 6:42 a.m., Jenna went to wake him for school. Caleb's bed was perfectly made. Too perfectly. The room smelled damp, heavier than before. "Caleb?" she called. No answer. She pulled the covers back. The mattress sagged inward as if something heavy had pressed up from below. Mark dropped to his knees and looked under the bed. The carpet was torn, pulled inward. Thin lines stretched from the edges toward a darkness that no longer behaved like shadow. Caleb was gone. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 cruisers at first, then 3 more. The sound of radios and boots filled the hallway, but none of it seemed to reach Caleb's room properly. The air inside felt padded, muted, like sound was being swallowed before it could settle. An officer named Hargreave took the lead. Late 40s, calm voice, careful eyes. "No open windows," he said after the initial sweep. "No signs of forced entry." Jenna stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. He wouldn't run away. Hargreave nodded. Most kids don't. They checked closets, under furniture, the attic, the crawl space beneath the house. Nothing. When Hargreave finally knelt beside the bed, Mark felt his stomach tighten. The officer didn't reach under immediately. He stared first. Then he leaned down and shined his flashlight into the gap. The beam didn't behave right. Instead of spreading, it narrowed like the darkness was pressing back. Hargreave straightened quickly. "What?" Mark asked. "What did you see?" Hargreave shook his head. Probably nothing. But his voice had lost its confidence. The dogs arrived an hour later, 3 of them. They pulled eagerly at their leashes until they reached Caleb's room. Then they stopped. One whimpered. Another refused to cross the threshold entirely. The handler tried coaxing them forward, then tugging them gently. "They don't like this room," he muttered. Jenna's voice shook. "Why?" The handler hesitated. Sometimes they just don't. But Mark noticed how he avoided looking under the bed. That afternoon, an officer measured the room. Mark didn't understand why until he saw the look on her face. She measured the length, then the width, then the height beneath the bed. She measured it twice. "Is there supposed to be a crawl space under here?" she asked. "No," Mark said. "The house is slab on grade." She frowned. "This doesn't make sense." "How much space is there?" Jenna asked. The officer hesitated. "More than there should be." That night they were told not to sleep in the house. They stayed at a motel off the highway, the kind with flickering ice machines and curtains that never fully closed. Jenna stared at the wall all night. Mark watched the door. At 2:17 a.m., Jenna spoke without turning her head. "He said it waited." Mark swallowed. "What?" "Caleb. He said it waited." Mark didn't answer. Neither of them slept. The search stretched into days, then weeks. The house was torn apart, walls opened, floorboards lifted. Nothing beneath Caleb's room explained the measurements. No tunnels, no voids, no evidence of collapse. And yet, the space beneath the bed remained wrong. An officer finally said it out loud. "There's more room under there than there is between the joists." Mark snapped. "That's impossible." The officer met his eyes. "That's what we keep running into." After 2 weeks, the lead detective changed. Detective Rowe. Younger, sharper, less patient. She listened carefully as Mark repeated everything Caleb had said. When he finished, she didn't dismiss it. She asked, "Did he ever say what it wanted?" Mark hesitated. Jenna answered instead. "He said it asked his age." Rowe nodded slowly. "Anything else?" Mark's voice cracked. "He said it said he'd still fit." Rowe closed her notebook. "That's interesting," she said quietly. "How?" Jenna demanded. Rowe looked at the floor. "Children go missing in houses like this sometimes," she said. "Almost always around the same age." "What age?" Mark asked. Rowe hesitated. "Before they outgrow their beds." They weren't allowed back in the house for nearly a month. When they returned, it felt smaller. The ceilings lower, the walls closer. Caleb's room smelled worse. Damp, earthy. The bed was still there, untouched. Mark couldn't stop himself. He knelt and reached under. His fingers brushed the carpet. Then nothing. Not empty space. Absence. His hand went farther than it should have. Then something brushed back. Not a hand. Not a claw. Just pressure. Like something confirming he was still too large. Mark jerked his arm back and screamed. That night the first sound came. A soft scraping from beneath the bed. Jenna heard it too. They stood frozen in the hallway. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. "It's moving," Jenna whispered. Mark shook his head. No, we're done." They packed that night. Left furniture behind. Left the bed. They never looked under it again. The house went back on the market. Fresh paint, new carpet, a new bed bought in by the realtor. The listing photos showed a bright, cheerful child's room. No mention of the space beneath. The next family moved in 6 months later. They had a son, 7 years old. He chose the small bedroom at the end of the hall. The first night, he slept fine. The second night, he stood in the hallway rubbing his eyes. "Mom?" he asked. "There's something under my bed." She smiled. "It's just a new house, baby. Go back to sleep." So, if you hear something under your bed at night, it's probably best not to look. If you enjoy these stories and you'd like to support the channel, like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.